case I am doing my case study on is the Jessica Camilleri case. I'm going to go over a bit of the summary of the case and my understanding or perception of the legal issues, and then finish off with where I think the challenges lie moving forward with people who fit into this demographic. So the summary of the case is quite graphic, and I picked this case specifically because of the implications that the carer, who ended up being the victim in this case, was left by society to deal with a client with such a, I would consider, outstanding array of mental health issues. So Jessica Camilleri was diagnosed, and since she was in primary school, with a range of mental disorders, and these included intellectual disabilities, autism spectrum, intermittent explosive disorder, depression, schizophrenia, ADHD, and OCD. And this is a pretty impressive array of issues for one person to have to deal with, and one person to have to live with. And she had exhibited quite aggressive outbursts over the previous 4 or 5 years, and 4 of those outbursts had ended up with her in a court appearance on assault charges. These assault charges range from primarily pulling people's hair, but they range from random people in shopping centres who Jessica claimed they looked at her wrong, all the way up to her auntie, who she dragged down a flight of stairs. These 4 court appearances didn't result in any punishment for Jessica in terms of jail time. They did, however, give the court did recommend that Jessica be referred to a mental health professional, in which her mum had taken her to see, and was prescribed an array of mood-enhancing drugs and antidepressant drugs, which Jessica refused to take. During the actual attack itself, which was estimated to last almost an hour, Jessica stabbed her mum over 100 times. 57 of those times were to the head and neck, and ended up in a decapitation of Rita's head. She also removed the victim's eyes, tongue, and nose. And by the end of the incident, Jessica was carrying her mother's head down the street and calling 000, and she asked if the 000 the police on the 000 could revive her mum, telling her that she'd had actually cut her head off, and it was possible or in her own words, can you bring someone back to life if they don't have a head? Can you bring her back to life? This is quite a gruesome act, and definitely one of the highlights in heinous crimes for Australia. What was the challenging component of this for me was that Rita, the victim, who was her mum, was essentially burdened with her daughter and all of the mental health issues that her daughter presented with. She was expected to, by society and through the professionals that she spoke to and by police, to be able to and be capable of managing this Jessica as a client with all of these mental health issues, with no formal training, no support network, and no real understanding of what is required of her and how to best help her daughter out so that she can get the best amount of care. There were some very convincing arguments that Rita was underqualified to do this, to maintain this position, with constant references to Jessica refusing to take her drugs, Jessica becoming quite physically aggressive to everyone around her at times, and Rita not having any level of authority or even agency within her own home when Jessica was acting out. So Rita was essentially left in this environment with Jessica, who was very, very challenged, who had no real awareness or concept of what she was doing for the majority of the time. Jessica did show some remorse very intermittently when it came to menacing behaviour of people online. However, when it came to her family and her mum and even her sister, she was very aggressive. She'd made, leading up to the incident, her behaviour had become a lot more erratic. She'd made more regular threats of cutting people's heads off. She'd become very isolated within her own environment, watching the two horror films that she was very passionate about, which was Jeepers Creepers and the Chainsaw Massacre. She'd gotten into a very violent and aggressive argument with her sister, who removed the DVDs because she was sick of seeing them on all the time. And there was a 4-year-old in the house that everybody was a bit more protective of. However, due to Jessica's mental condition, she had an outburst, and Rita had decided to return those movies to keep the peace in there. Moving forward for these types of with people who fit into this category, with people who need psychiatric help and people who have an advanced or quite an in-depth mental health issue, I don't think that the social workers who are essentially family members are given adequate training or support to be able to maintain the adequate care needed for these people. And I think that's the biggest issue I found with everyone who sort of doesn't end up in a ward or in a hospital, is that their health is left to, so their care is left to family members who are not equipped or capable of providing safe and adequate care for them. Moving forward, my summary finished off with family members should be treated as social workers with the eyes of the government, and be given an abundance of resources needed to adequately care for that person, not necessarily a funding budget to maintain or make things easier. I don't think it's reasonable for society to move these vulnerable people into their own houses with more vulnerable carers who essentially are not equipped and understand what they're doing. The expense on the family member sacrificing their livelihood, the family members who are overworked and overstressed, then become, in this case, victims themselves, but they become excluded from getting help themselves when they're working too hard to maintain care.